who represent a wide range of interests in our community. We'll introduce them individually now. We've asked each of them to say a few words in response to what they heard tonight, in response to the book, whatever as it relates to our community and its future. David Barajas Sr., a Sterling Rock Falls businessman and former Sterling Township supervisor. Please welcome James G. Jim Burke. Katie Dallam-Pratt, a fourth-generation family farmer and marketing and tech coordinator for the University of Illinois Extension for Carroll, Lee, and Whiteside counties. John Gvozdjak, President and Chief Operating Officer of Frantz Manufacturing in Sterling. John Nelson, Assistant Professor of Business at Sauk Valley Community College. Betty Steiner, there she is, okay. Economic Development Administrator and Enterprise Zone Administrator for Whiteside County. And Jim Wright, Professor of Sociology at Sauk Valley Community College.
To begin with, and I think most people, not only sitting up here but in this room, are products of exactly what we're talking about. I thought it was very interesting. I want to say this early on. The title of Richard's book, Caught in the Middle. But I want to give it a different slant. Something that I have thought about my entire life. Something that I have lived with my entire life. Caught in the middle. I'm Mexican American. I'm a red-blooded American boy. Proud of my Mexican heritage. Very proud of my Mexican heritage. I've been caught in the middle for a long time. I can remember my oldest sister being an educator and literally sitting at the table with my folks crying, when are the Mexicans going to understand that it's all about education? And from there on, I've tried to pick up the fight and take it. Caught in the middle, very much so. I think the one thing that we all realize in this room, the one biggest asset that we all have is persistence. We all grew up in a mill town. We all grew up around farms. We don't know what it's like to quit. I can remember as Richard was speaking, some of these experiences were coming back to me. And we talk about labor force. And I know Jimmy would probably remember even better than I would, the local industry that was in Oregon, Illinois, that moved and ended up coming back because we had a better labor force. And then towards the end, the other comment that I caught was talking about globalization. And listening to Richard talk about the Far East and about Europe. Let's not forget our backyard. In our business, as I talk to these young people, having been on the school board and just as big an advocate as anyone sitting in this room for education, and telling these young kids, whether they're Anglo, whether they're Hispanic, whether they're African American, learn the Spanish language. And one of the questions I asked them to make my point is this: tell me how many countries in the Western Hemisphere don't speak Spanish. Can you say that? Can you say that about us anymore? Then you look at Canada with French and English, and you look at Brazil with Portuguese. All the rest are a dialect of Spanish. Now, as I picked up more as Richard was, how many minutes do I have, Richard? As I picked up more as I was listening to Richard, and we talked about the things that we do here in the Midwest, or the things that we can do, can we sell them to the rest of the Western Hemisphere? Si vamos a hablar con ellos, nos van a entender If we go and speak to these other countries, are they going to feel comfortable in understanding us? You bet they are. We're going to be prepared in that way. Persistence, my job now, is to support these young people, to give them a chance to come up and produce their ideas and help us build the Midwest. One of the things I said to my wife, and listening to all of the political that's going on now, you know what we should do? Invite them here. Invite them here, because as the economy gets stronger, what's the biggest asset you need in the economy? The labor force. Many years ago, I learned from my parents how loyal they were, how hardworking they were. Let's bring the labor force here. You want to talk globally? Let's talk Western Hemisphere. Let's look at our own backyard and see what we can do there.
Thank you, David. Mayor Burke, your comments?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I tell you, I'm really pleased to see so many people here. It certainly shows that there's an interest in what's going on as far as jobs and the future of Sauk Valley. Earlier today, Richard had mentioned that in communities that are working to rejuvenate themselves, to advance employment and so forth, need strong leadership. And the Sauk Valley News Media has sponsored this. They've been promoting this through the newspaper. They got these folks here tonight, all of you, Richard here, and they certainly reflect a strong leadership with this whole issue. One of the things that I got out of the book was was really thinking about, he advocates creativity, thinking about creativity. And it got me thinking about, you know, our assets, the human assets that we've got here. And we really do. You know, you take a look at the industries that have closed down, and these people that spent decades developing skills. They may not be college graduates, but they develop skills, and that is a human resource that's here that I think that we need to try to build on. And I'll give you a real brief example and then pass this on. We had York Emico, or better known as JCI, closed up in Dixon. They were in the making refrigeration equipment, and at one time they employed 400. They had 200 employed at the time that they closed up. Very few college-educated people, but very, very, very skilled and experienced at metal fabrication. We have a company now that we are working with that is very serious about coming to the Sauk Valley for two reasons. One is the large number of people that we've got experienced in metal fabrication, and the second one is the fact that there's a galvanizing plant in the industrial park. So I think that we need to take a look at this whole Sauk Valley and really do an inventory of all these skillful people that we've got here that really are kind of really going to waste in a lot of ways. So I think that's one thing that we need to do, and that's one of the ideas really that I got out of reading the book.
You're up, Katie.
Thank you. Well, I come at this, I guess, very differently. We're, maybe I should use this other microphone. Let's try this one. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So we're a fourth-generation family farm. My husband and his parents and brother and wife all farm together just east of Dixon. So I come at this from the agricultural perspective. And agriculture has been global for a very long time. In January, I participated in the American Farm Bureau discussion meet, and this was one of our questions, was how do American farmers capitalize on the growing global demand for agricultural products? And the number that we started our discussion with was 9 billion. 9 billion people are expected to populate our world by 2045. So if the Midwest is going to pull itself up by its bootstraps, it's going to be on agriculture. And Mr. Longworth made that observation in bioscience, biotechnology, biomass. We have to feed and fuel 9 billion people, and that's going to come from American agriculture. The other thing I found interesting and rather ironic is that just last week, global agriculture came and knocked from America is being produced in a sustainable manner. And they asked us all sorts of questions. If we employed anybody else on our farm, and if we did, how were they treated? What type of land do we have in production? What type of fertilizer we use? They even wanted to know how many passes we make over a field. We were able to give them all that information due to the technology that is now in use in agriculture. But that's how agriculture is competitive in the world. Ethanol is the other industry that has really shot us into the global economy. We are exporting ethanol. In fact, the company that brought this auditor to our farm exported 100% of its ethanol production last year. They exported it to Brazil. And a lot of people look at Brazil as one of our biggest competitors. We're exporting ethanol to our biggest competitor. So I think that agriculture really holds a lot of promise, and really the jobs that would come from that are going to be in that skilled labor force, in that creativity and innovation. And how do we use our plant and animals to feed and fuel us, to provide fiber for us as well, and for the rest of the world? We're not only producing raw commodities in the Sauk Valley, but we're producing knowledge as well.
Out of order here, but John Gvozdjak, you're up.
My last name's really not a typical Midwestern last name. I appreciate Larry's efforts for getting it right. I arrived here, I moved here in 1983, and met my wife and Luann, and we got married, and I had an instant acceptance into the community, which was very nice. And so now she's stuck with the last name too. So. Since I've been here, I've been involved in a lot of things in my business career. I worked at National Manufacturing for 20 years, and I worked at Amcor Bank for 5 years after that, and in the midst of the Great Recession came back home here to Sterling and Frantz Manufacturing for the past 3 years. And again, seen a lot, learned a lot, and I feel I am a part of this community, and I'm interested in contributing whatever I can from the business side of things to help improve us, get us back on our feet, and move us forward and change and transform, because that's really what we need to do. I've been involved in a small informal group of business people who were collaborating together to attempt to get some funding from our Department of Commerce, our federal Department of Commerce. That wasn't ultimately successful, but we've been trying to do a few things on the collaboration front. Unfortunately, fortunately, businesses have their own interests, their own issues, their own problems, and sometimes there's not a lot of commonality. But I will say that the businesses that are here because they want to be here, and I'm a proponent of growing your own, growing what's here, nurturing that, and making room for new ideas too. And I'm certainly willing to put my effort into nurturing that along in any way I can.
John Nelson from the college.
Yes, I teach business and economics here at Sauk, and one thing that I always try to do is to relate the concepts and principles that we learn to current events, things that are going on. So I thought for my little intro piece tonight, I would read some very recent headlines. And Richard, you brought us, I guess, a lot of not real good news, but good things to think about. I think there's some positive things that are going on today, so I'm going to read you some of these headlines. The first one is not positive. It says, GE moving X-ray business from Waukesha, Wisconsin to China. And here in the Sauk Valley, we've been reading headlines like that for literally decades. Let's move on. Headline, and this is from CBS News in Chicago. Some jobs from China moving back USA. I believe the company is in Aurora called Peerless. I'm not positive of that. But one thing they quote is rapidly rising costs in China, low quality workmanship. Companies are thinking about moving back. Yeah, that's real good. Headline, desperately seeking Americans for factory jobs. Machinists, tool die makers, says many skilled workers in these fields are now retiring. It asks the question, but who wants to work in a factory? Food processing. Jobs go unfilled for lack of skilled workers, say employers. Again, talking about machinists, etc. And I think, Mayor Burke, you brought up, we have some of those skills. We perhaps need to do a better job of marketing those skills and getting maybe some of these jobs back. Headline, President Obama to cut top corporate tax rate for manufacturers to 25% from 35%. This is good news. This again adds to our competitiveness. Headline, China's pollution puts a dent in its economy. Cost of cleaning up and doing business there are rising rapidly. So, Richard, I wanted to ask you, you wrote your book approximately 4 years ago. A lot has happened in our global economy. And there's been an awful lot of negative news, if you will. I'm hopeful that perhaps we're seeing some positive things, and those positive things can help us accomplish some of the reasons why all of us are here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Betty, your turn.
Thank you. Yes, I've read the book. I've been asked that many times, and I have. Most of my colleagues have also. I think I'm here a little bit on the economic development side of things to give you a little information on a personal message and on an economic development regional message. Globalization. I'm well aware of it, as most of you in this room are. How many of us have been affected by layoffs or the company moving the jobs to China or overseas or to Mexico? I've experienced that personally in my lifetime. When working for General Electric in Morrison, I remember the visitors from Japan touring our plant with their cameras and their notebooks. Little did I know what effect that was going to have on my life as well as many others. So when I read the book and thinking back on those days, my younger years and working at GE, I'm happy with what I'm doing now, but it sure, manufacturing is a good job. Regionalism in our area. Working regionally has been going on in the Sauk Valley region for some time now. In 1998, Whiteside County Development worked with the Quad City Regional Development Group, which covers both Illinois and Iowa. We also worked with the Galesburg 2000 Development to target metal working industry at that time. In 2005, a grant was awarded to Greater Sterling Development, which brought joint efforts to expand employment and sales is our hope. In closing, I want to let you know that I and my economic development colleagues have and will continue to work across city, county, and state lines to expand the possibility of economic growth for our citizens. Discussion and ideas are always a great forum, and I look forward to questions and exchanges of ideas this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Jim Wright, Professor of Sociology.
Thank you. I grew up in this area also. Sterling High, class of '76. My dad worked at GE for 30 years. I had a great-grandfather who worked at RBW for 40 years. I had various uncles who worked at the mill. I had another uncle who worked at Lawrence for 30 years, I believe. I worked there for a year and a half myself before going to college. I grew up in Sterling, lived in Rock Falls for a time. Went off to college. Started my career elsewhere in the country, moved back to the area. I live in Dixon now. As a sociologist, I'm interested in social trends and changes in culture in particular. And Richard mentioned Middletown in transition. hearing his talk. I think I've been watching for 50-odd years the Rock River Valley in transition, and the nature of the community has changed dramatically over that time. Obviously, the industrial base leaving, the agricultural base changing over that time. And I have maybe one simple question, a simple concern. I have a lot of things I can talk about. I want to boil it all down to this. Based on the history I watched, experienced, and studied a lot when I've been in town and away, I want to know, are we living in a time of diminishing or diminished expectations for this area? Or for the Midwest, but I'm talking particularly about the Rock River Valley. Are we willing to, let it become something much less, and we're going to be okay with it? Maybe is my question. I think that, as an educator, I'm interested in seeing my students, the youth of the area, go out there and, improve their lives. I especially would like to see some of them stick around and improve their town. But I know we're exporting those brains. That's a major export from this valley now. Brain drain, but consider it a kind of export. And I don't think we can afford that export. The trick is trying to get the youth to stay or return once they have more education and training skills, and try to do more of that innovation and entrepreneurial stuff, because that's what we need now. But they also need to link up with the world economy, because that's what we're talking about here. And so I think we should be offering a lot more courses in Mandarin, not just Spanish and German and French in the schools, but Mandarin, Chinese, Portuguese, Arabic, Korean, starting K through 12, all the way through classes here at Sauk. I understand there are some bureaucratic impediments to that, at least at this level. I don't know how much type of political lobbying and effort it would take to do that with the governing bodies that oversee us, but I think that's something that might help us form those kinds of linkages with overseas industries, and maybe try to attract some investment from those places, bring it back here, or try to link up brains here with brains there, and basically share ideas and try to boost that innovation and entrepreneurial activity.